you. Jan Nicholas talked about Angular language service, taking you all to a completely different spectrum of Angular. Hello, everyone. I am Ankita. I work as a front-end engineer or senior principal engineer for a cybersecurity company called SecureWorks. And like you mentioned, all the way from Austin, Texas. You can find me outdoors mostly, or you can find me on socials that I have for you here. And today, the clicker. Okay. Today, we're all going to deep dive into the latest updates from Angular material. And there actually been a lot. No matter whether you've used it or not, but I'm pretty sure everyone in this room who is familiar with Angular is at least aware of the existence of Angular material, right? Like, has anyone not heard of it? I thought so too. It's, and the thing about Angular material is like a design system, and the thing about no matter how big or small your application is, it is imperative to have, for a consistent, scalable user experience, it's kind of imperative to have a set of foundational guidelines or a design system. So Material Design, which is Google's open source design system, was announced 2014, actually, the first version of it was. And its name does not come from the Material Girl song by Madonna. It comes from how you interact in the real world with a material, like an actual physical material. The borders, the edges, the shadows, they all kind of provide a hint about interaction that can take place with an object. And so Google translated how we interact with physical material into how the interactions with digital materials should look like, and created this design system. And Angular material is derived from it. It is based off of it. In version 15, they refactored a lot of components, and they updated the implementation so that it improved accessibility, it adhered more to material design principles, or the design specs, and it allowed for faster adoption of Google's materials design specs into Angular materials library. And I know that one version update was quite a lot. For some people who were using it, it was like a breaking change in some aspects because they changed the internal APIs to quite an extent. But now that they are at the same specification level with what Google's material specs is, it's a lot more easier for them to keep up with any material changes, Google materials design spec changes that happen. And it's a lot more easier to extend it or customize it. And I know there was a recent announcement, without wanting to trigger anyone about web components, but there was a recent announcement that material web components are going to be deprecated, or they have entered maintenance mode. What does that mean for Angular material? Actually, nothing. Because, like I said, Angular material was built on, sorry. It was built on MDC, not to be confused with, sorry, I keep doing this with the clicker. Not to be confused with MWC, which are the web components. So absolutely not affected. Angular material will continue expanding the way it is without ever, I think, ever going into maintenance mode. So having clarified that, why would you still, like, these are some basic highlights that honestly are similar to all the other libraries that are available. But the most significant one for me is that without even realizing how many Google products or services that you use that use Angular, they're also actually using Material. And so when your clients use Angular app based out of Google Materials design, the interaction patterns are so familiar that it just makes more sense. For us, I know we spent 0 effort on accessibility, but just because we were using Angular material components, our accessibility scores when we ran the audit were already good for a lot of our customers and government clients because they take care of accessibility. Accessibility is at the core, and it makes it just so much more easy. And with every Angular version update, which happens twice a year on the date that they've announced and never misses a beat, same with Material. You'll never be blocked because of this library to be able to upgrade your app. And it's always at par with the latest Angular Material updates, or it's always built on top of that. So it's actually really easy to update. And over the years, the API has expanded so much. Like just for a simple card component, you can see the differences, and all because of standalone components and all the other initiatives taken by both the Angular team and the Angular Material team to expand the library so that it is more composable, customizable, adoptable, easy to implement, etc. There have been a lot of changes, not just for cards and buttons, but you have also by the virtue of adopting new MDC components or the design guide specifications. The list component has new list supported. The menu component has more customization options through their API, and et cetera, et cetera. The snack bar component is more extensible, et cetera. So recently, this is the latest Google Material version, Material 3, also known as Material U. I think this was announced 2022, end of 2022. And so the Angular Material team has adopted it. With version 17, they announced, or they released, there was publicly available, Material 3 was publicly available, but as an experiment. And with version 18, it is now a stable API to be used, and it just offers a more polished and customized user experience at par with the Material 3 library. And here's the thing, though. You can still update your app to version 18, which is the latest version, at least for a month. But you can also still stay on M2. All you will end up doing once you run the NG update, and I mean, that's another point, right? You can use the Angular CLI to update Angular and Angular Material the same way. So once you run NG update, all it does is automatically converts all of the places where you were using the mixins or any SAS APIs for Material to M2 versions. So you will still be on version 18, but you will be using the M2 or the Material 2 version if you choose to do so. And so maybe in the next few slides, we'll help you decide if you're still on the fence, I don't want to spend the time and effort to update to Material here, why should I? There's some very clear visual differences. For example, this is date picker, and you can visually see between the left side and the right side how one is has more curved edges, clearer visual indicator of the date range selected. Or, I mean, I think every component, every application has a dialog, and the one on the left versus the right kind of makes it easier to identify what action is the user, what are the actions the user can take and which one can they select. So maybe y'all can think within their heads amongst yourselves as I'm scrolling through these. This is a paginator, like which one do you prefer, left or right? Again, this one I think highlights, I think one is more clearer or crisper or also more aligned with all of the other Google products and services that we use. And I think buttons is really clearly visible what the differences are. These ones have more horizontal variations in terms of different colors versus the right one. But they have more vertical variations. And I would personally prefer more options of a component that I can then extend or customize to the colors or whatever theming options that I want on my own. And so, I don't know, is there anyone who strongly feels like, no, the left one is better, or no, the right one's better? All the ones on this side are actually Material 3 designs. On that side, on the left, are Material 2 designs. So if you feel like, no, Material 2 designs are more my style, maybe still I can convince you how easy it is to migrate, and you would still want to do that. But that's the thing, like even though they've changed, and we'll look into it later, they've changed how theming works in Material quite a lot. It's still easy, and that's why they've removed focus from having multiple palettes to one option that you can extend. So there's no automatic migration or no schematic to help you migrate, because again, Material can be adopted and extended in so many different ways. But it's really easy. There are simple steps that you can take, which are manual, but they also have, as you're updating, you can still have both M2 and M3 APIs, or SaaS APIs, coexisting in your repository, in your application. And they have some backward compatibility support that then allows it easier to migrate. You can focus on one Material component at a time, or if you're using Material to style your custom components, you can focus on one component at a time and migrate as and when you go. And once you're done with it, and then get rid of all the M2 references, and you have the default, which is the M3 APIs. So for example, one of the major differences that instead of using the color attribute, primary, accent, or warn, they now prefer using CSS. So you can just include backward compatibility. And we'll look at the code in a bit, but and for typography, they've changed the CSS classes a bit to better align with the Google Materials M3 specs. So you can still have support by passing the backward compatibility through to the mixin. And another thing is that they require all their mixins to be wrapped around a CSS selector. You can just wrap it around HTML body, root, or whatever is the parent of CSS or your app root or whatever. And like I mentioned earlier, instead of having color primary or color equals accent or warn, they prefer having CSS classes because they're more extendable and adoptable, which also makes it easier, right? Like if you just define it once, the tertiary button, the color variant to be tertiary, all the buttons inside that are in that CSS selector will get those styles. And there's some unsupported properties that are easy to identify and remove too, like instead of using the background color attribute from the matte tab group, or instead of having an appearance legacy style supported, because there are other better variations for matte toggle buttons. But those are all simple and straightforward and really, honestly, not that confusing. So, and same for typography mixins. It's a matter of just adding an import for a new mixin. Now, theming, which honestly has been one of the most confusing aspects up until now because you had to focus on creating palettes. And the whole ideology behind how colors are handled has completely shifted up until material designs focused on palettes. And palettes are basically like the swatches, the color swatches that you buy if you want to paint a wall or something that have different hue patterns. They're kind of like that you would generate or manually create or however you would want to do it. And they would have these limited palettes that an app would be themed with. And they have a lot more design token-based focus on theming with Material 3. And they have not just, so they have primary, secondary, tertiary colors. And they also have those colors and how they should look like on a surface or on an elevated surface or in a container when it's inside a border and stuff like that. So that kind of allows for it to have a more granular approach to be able to customize it and make it more flexible. Because it's all tokens based, you can easily override them with your own design tokens that you would have specified. And the new SAS API to create a theme also is so easy. You can manually just define a theme. You can mention the color, which would have the color would have the theme type, and whether you can also just provide a primary color for the app. You don't even have to provide all the other variants, but you can choose to. And so you can define the color, the typography, and the density, which, if you're not familiar, density is just how compact or how tight the components should look versus how spacious and big they should look. Or you could use a schematic, which makes it even more easier to generate a theme. And like I said, theme is optional to pass. If you don't specify a type, it generates the SAS file for both. And primary color is the only color that you have to specify. If it's not specified, there's this huge idea of color science that Material has published several blogs on and has researched and understood it. And so based on the one primary color that you provide, it is able to generate all the other variations that it needs to make your app look more, basically not look like as a 2-year-old designed it or pick the colors for it. Because I feel like colors are so hard to pick when you have to think of accessibility and theming and how the shadows should look like and how hover states and all the interaction states should look like. So it makes it really easy that you just have to specify one color, but again, like I said, you can specify secondary and tertiary colors, and then you can specify the typography and the density to howsoever you want to. And another thing that you get when you update to V18 now are component schematics, and these are so straightforward. These are, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them are just out of the box material components that you just generate the schematic, and it generates a component that would have the exact functionality of an address form or navigation or dashboard or whatever you choose to pick. So you don't have to write a single line of code, and you just have a address form generated for you. The last one is a drag and drop CDK, which basically, and let me just also show how they're just one-line schematics. And so like I was saying, the last one is a CDK drag and drop, which will generate a component that has implemented the CDK directive for drag and drop so that you can have that functionality. What's the CDK? Glad you asked. It is Component Development Kit. It is basically, you can think of them as Lego blocks for creating UI components. If you just want the absolute basic fundamental component that you want to build upon and has no materials, designs, or no material flavor on it, just this purely dumb component. And actually, material components are built on top of CDK. They extend a lot of CDK utilities, directives. Here's the list for them. And utilities, directive components, a lot of the material components are extended on top of it, like the stepper on the dialog, etc. But if you don't want them to look nothing like a material stepper or dialog or whatever, or want to use the functionality or the utility or the standalone directive for it, you can use any of these from the CDK. And actually, this is from the roadmap. There are a lot more components and directives and other good things coming to Angular Material and CDK because the Angular team is constantly working on it, as we know. And I know over the years, no net new component has been added to both the material and CDK library, but that's definitely about to change soon. I know I recently found out actually that in version 19, one of the longest requested features of a time picker is going to get released, which is great because sometimes just a date picker isn't enough, at least in most applications. So the team is definitely focusing on it. And now I am going to switch to quickly show you this demo to again highlight how easy it is. Like I mentioned, I live in Austin. We also claim to be the world's capital of live music. And I just attended this ACL, Austin City Limits Music Festival, and I just saw these artists perform. Anyways, this is just a demo application. So these are just cards and some notifications. So the notification component, I just have very basic components here. The notification component is just something that uses a material snack bar, but I'm just highlighting how the one snack bar component, I have themed it so that it has different colors. And then this is a completely custom, nothing to do with material component that has an Angular component that has used material theming colors to be themed. Like this is my app's primary color. Like as you can see, the button has the same color. And this is just a component, like I mentioned, the schematics allows you to generate components. And I just ran one command and got this. So what that looks like is, I think this is big enough, okay. Actually, let me show you the customer. Yeah, so I just ran the schematic and it gave me this, how many, 99 lines of a form with all the fields inside a mat card, looking pretty and everything. So right now, I have the app updated in Angular 18. Everything is Angular 18, including material. And my styles, as you can see, once you run the ng update command, it'll automatically update all your references to the M2 version of it. So I had in the app a light theme and a dark theme, in which I had specified primary, accent, and worn. If you don't specify this worn color, it takes the default matte red color palette when you're generating a theme. So, and I just have the app right now to respond to the user's theme preference. So just to highlight, there's a dark theme and a light theme. And this is where I'm at right now. I'm just trying to do a sped up version of what the update would look like. So I've already updated the app, but I'm still on M2. How would I switch to M3? The first thing that I would need to do is generate a theme. So I would end this and run the ng generate Angular material schematic. It will take some time. Okay, and the first thing it asks me is the primary color, and I have my cheat code here. So my primary color here is the same as my primary color that I have defined in my palette for that I'm currently using when I'm still on material 2. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So I will pass that. Oh, we just boop. Try that again. Okay, I will pass that, and like I said, it also says that I can leave the secondary color blank, but might as well since I have it. This is just some hex color that I decided to go with, and the tertiary color is actually equivalent to the, so when you use color primary, that's what in material 3 primary means, gets translated into, and tertiary color is adjacent to color accent in material 2. So use that, and then I don't really care about the neutral color palette, and I'll specify sure you can add it, which it's asking which directory, like you can add it where. And system level variables make it so much more easier to have dynamic theming to the point that you can have a color picker in your app, and your user can choose what the theme of the app should look like. It's too much to cover in 30 minutes, so I'm going to keep going and going to try to do both. So as you can see, it created a theme file for me, which I have open here already. So actually what I did is, to move fast, you can see that this theme file was generated with the colors that I've provided, and it has the theme defined both light and dark and uses the primary and tertiary color. But what I did is I created this file that is using the old light and dark themes and also the new material theme that I just generated. And I kind of already added all the things that I had in here. Like I'm using just the user's preference to toggle between the two themes, light and dark. And you can have to add the matte core theme, which is how all the material components get themed. And then this is the most recommended way of how you theme custom components. Like I showed, I had the notification banner and the key value component that are my custom components that I'm theming using material. So I just included their mix-ins. And so again, styles file is just what I had up until now. After I generated the empty theme file, this is what I will be using. And I've just copy-pasted all the imports and everything over here. But you can see that if I feel like, okay, like I have the light theme, I'm going to pass it all to all the material components, but I actually am not ready to update all my custom components because the two components that I'm using here, they are actually using a primary 300, and that's not even a valid hue in the new material SAS map that gets generated. So I'm going to need my time to figure out what actually the background color should be for this component. So I need to not feel pressure to update all the components in one massive MR. So I can just wrap it around this if condition inside my mixin for this particular custom component, because I am passing as you can see, I'm passing the M2 light theme over here. That gets passed to this component. And there's an easy way to check whether you're using the M2 API or the M3 API. If the value of this function is returned to be 0, it is M2. If it's 1, then it's M3. So I can just wrap it around, and for the notifications banner, I just have like, okay, if it's the new API, then you can use these colors. But if it's the old API or the old palette that's being passed, then you use the M2 get color from palette option. So I can slowly move step by step, one component at a time, and update it accordingly. So what that would look like, going back to my editor quick. Like I said, I'm already M2, so in my Angular, instead of using these styles, if I use the new material, the styles, global style files that uses the M3 APIs, if I update that and do an ng serve, not that, ng serve, and run the app, now I should pick up the primary color or the palette that I provided, that I had just generated. And you can actually see the difference. And I have the app with the old or the M2 things actually hosted here, so you can see the difference. It's kind of clear that it's not the same hex that I provided, and I think that's because the schematic that when it generates the actual map that it generated over here, it ran all the color science thing that I was talking about. So you see that it says that it was generated from this value, but it's not even here because it was like, I think you mean this color, but basically it makes it look more professional. The buttons are, even the card has a different background color than what it had. Like in the light theme, it just had a same white background color. So it kind of updates or uplifts your app a little bit and just has a more clearer feel to it. And you can change that. You can change whichever color you want to. For example, like I said, instead of color accent, now we have classes, and I have a tertiary button defined here, which uses the color variant tertiary, the tertiary color I used. Or maybe let's use the secondary. And you can see that this color changed to the secondary color palette that I had provided, and it's so easy. And similarly with all the rounded border radiuses and stuff like that, it's just a CSS variable, and it's so much, because it doesn't have any additional selectors, all the CSS variables are wrapped in HTML or root. They're so easy to override that you don't have to find the specific CSS class to override. You can just pass a new value to that CSS variable using CSS, basically, or any design token that you have, you can just pass that value. But yeah, that is all I have for you. And thank you.